JoJo's Bizarre Adventure. One of the most fun, engaging, and unique anime of recent years, despite pretty much every character's name being a pop culture reference. Full of colorful and fun characters, lore that is deep without being too absurdly extensive, and some of the most standout and unique powers in any anime, with the countless stands of varying powers and abilities, the almighty and monstrous Pillar Men, and the insanely versatile abilities offered to the users of Hamon. An anime that regularly swaps out its main character for someone in the next generation of a single family line, something that many other series and multiple medias have tried and failed to make successful. This series has been incredibly successful in. And, as a breath of fresh air, it's one of those rare anime where the main character isn't a complete idiot only obsessed with food and fighting, but instead are incredibly intelligent and carefully calculating, able to come up with a solution to seemingly inescapable situations. It's an anime I would have loved to review and discuss in great length, but sadly, anime has become one of the most single risky topics to talk about on YouTube, outside of something that straight up breaks the guidelines. Fortunately, anime video games are still safe, and JoJo has had its fair share of interactive adventures as well. But perhaps the most unique is JoJo's Bizarre Adventure, Eyes of Heaven. This game has a number of things going for it, from an innovative combat system, unique story, and decent gameplay and open-world aspects. But does unique and innovative necessarily mean good? That's what I'm hoping to answer in my first of, hopefully, many reviews in which I try to determine whether a game is good or not. Is Eyes of Heaven the right blade to cut through this bizarre adventure? Or is it just another dull tool that you should discard? But before we begin, I'd like to say thank you to my good friend Escape Rune Playa for gifting me this game. This review wouldn't be possible since the game is sold at full price, and he was generous enough to send me the gift cards when the price was cut down. So thanks to his generosity, I can give you, ladies and swordsmen, a JoJo fan's perspective of the latest JoJo's Bizarre Adventure video game. Be sure to slash, not lash at him, and give my regards for making this video possible. Oh, and yeah, before I begin, I'll still inevitably talk about certain plot points in the series. So, if you haven't watched JoJo's Bizarre Adventure yet and plan to, you may not want to watch this. You've been warned. But if you've already watched the show or you just don't care, let's get right into it. Starting off with the story, this game is yet another breath of fresh air amongst anime video games. Whereas most games tend to follow the events of the show to the letter, Eyes of Heaven takes a route similar to Dragon Ball Xenoverse, but in a way that makes sense. Starting off at the final battle of Part 3 of the show, Jotaro faces Dio in one final epic battle. After a hard-earned victory, Jotaro and the surviving Stardust Crusaders prepare to head home when they're suddenly attacked by enemies they previously defeated, along with their deceased comrades, as well as being joined by the familiar face of Speedwagon from Part 1, which took place over 100 years before Part 3. It is then revealed that an insanely powerful evil force is gathering the enemies of the JoJo lineage across time and space, as well as brainwashing and abducting their allies to fight against them. However, all is not lost, as Speedwagon has a part of the Holy Corpse, an item of great power and importance in Part 7 of the anime. Basically a Deus Ex Machina that can do nearly anything. I had compared this game to Xenoverse, but the Holy Corpse puts this story in a league above Xenoverse, as this is a canonical, in-universe explanation of how these otherwise impossible things can happen, rather than just some made-for-the-game antagonist just having special magic to mess with things. Also, while Xenoverse does mix up a few things, it still mostly follows the events of the show. Whereas Eyes of Heaven sees the JoJo's going through several different points of the timeline, usually after the events of that particular saga, where the villains and a handful of the heroes have been destroyed. So it's a shock to you and the characters to see their deceased friends and foes back and fighting against them. But by defeating the enemy and taking the piece of the Holy Corpse in their possession, the heroes free their ally from the mind control and recruit them to their side, resulting in a huge party of fan favorites from the series to choose from. This huge party able to travel together thanks to the stand-wielding turtle from Part 5. Once again, an in-universe explanation as to why we can have this small army of heroes on our side, despite only having a handful of Holy Corpse parts required to jump through time. As I said before, the main characters all come from one bloodline, one ancestry, so it's interesting to see these heroes who had come before them and interact with their ancestors they've only ever heard stories about, if that at all. Speaking of interactions, this is an open world game, so when you're not fighting, you can run around the overworld, all of which are perfectly recreated locations from the anime itself, feeling like you're really running around in the show. You can switch between characters in your party whenever you please, each of them having a special ability, allowing some of them who interact with certain parts of the area in certain ways. Like Jotaro being able to destroy certain objects, or Kakyoin and Yukiko being able to grapple to a singular location on the map. Very few, if any, characters are without one use or another. However, there are a few parts of the story that just don't make sense. The first half of the story, other than repelling the attacks on the JoJo's from the villains, is trying to figure out who is the Noble One, the ringleader all the other villains constantly state who they work for. But, in addition to being painfully obvious, since there are a handful of villains who show up who are completely loyal only to a certain individual who would become the Noble One, the characters can't seem to piece it together and constantly tell the defeated villains to reveal the identity of the Noble One, only for them to refuse and escape. Here's the thing. We have 2 members in this party who can read minds. Old Joseph Joestar and Rohan Kashibe. Yet never once do our heroes who I told you earlier are mostly geniuses, ever think of using these two obvious solutions to get the answers they need. Another thing that doesn't make sense is during one point in the story, Jotaro finds himself unable to go to the affected timeline through the tears in reality they've been traveling through all the time. And the group is left to guess that only certain characters are meant to be in certain timelines, with only Jonathan Joestar and Josuke Higashikata able to enter these versions of reality, which is the alternate universe created at the end of Part 6, which feature alternate universe counterparts of Jonathan and Josuke respectively. Johnny Joestar and Josuke Higashikata. Yeah, the JoJo's of Part 4 and Part 8 have the exact same name. In a series where the main characters all already have the same nickname, that's pretty lazy. Either way, this strange thing of splitting up the group is never featured or talked about again, so I don't know why it was brought up in the first place. It really only serves as a lazy reason for these two JoJo's to meet their counterpart, and forces you to play as one of the two characters from this part until you reunite with the rest of the group. Also forcing you to play as a different character than the one you've been maining this whole time. Also, as a small personal gripe, this is the part of the game where we are introduced to Joshu Higashikata, and I absolutely hate him. He does absolutely nothing but whine and simp over a girl named Yasuho, who doesn't even like him and only joins the adventure because he thinks Part 8 Josuke is leaving with Part 4 Josuke to go meet up with Yasuho. Oh, and did I mention he also keeps screaming Yasuho's name all the time while making the most cursed face I've ever seen? What the f*** is that? Oh my god, if this is where JoJo is heading, I'm jumping ship at Part 7.
虫刺されフェチってわかる。あれに興奮する。以上。
And at two separate points during the story, you will come across this man named Darby, a scummy, cheating gambler many people hated for his smug attitude and underhanded tactics, who will force you into playing a game of poker. Yes, this fighting game actually makes you stop twice to play a game of poker. Admittedly, when it is a side mission you can do whenever you want, it is very fun. But when it is mandatory for you to continue the game, this fighting game, it is really annoying. It is similar to regular poker. You and Darby have a number of chips to play with, and to win the overall game and continue, you have to get Darby to 1 chip or less, as the minimum gamble is 2 chips. Raise or call on the number of chips and try to draw a winning hand, with the option of swapping out cards to get a better hand. But then the mind games begin, as poker is generally a game of strategy. Do you settle with 2 pair when you have a chance to get a full house? Keep in mind, there's a chance you could give away cards that could give you a winning hand only to have them replaced with garbage. There is a cheating system in play where if you correctly hit a small lineup of buttons in less than 5 seconds, you can swap them for cards of definitely higher value, but you only have 2 cheating opportunities to start with, and the only way to get more is if you lose rounds to Darby, which you obviously don't want. This still doesn't mean it's gonna hand you a royal flush. Your best bet is to leave the cards making your hand so the ones you swap in will give you a slightly better hand. But it still has the chance to mess you up and give you just a bunch of high numbers. And you still need to keep in mind certain factors, such as which suits what cards are to improve your hand. Again, this is a fighting game and it expects you to know the finer points of poker. But Darby can cheat too, and if you fail the button prompt, he'll more than likely get a hand that will be very difficult to beat. There's also a mental gauge that determines the difficulty of how easy it is to cheat or stop Darby from cheating. Fill the gauge successfully by cheating yourself or stopping Darby from cheating, which results in a smaller button prompt, with a minimum of 3 buttons. Fail to cheat or stop Darby from cheating raises the gauge and makes you have more button prompts, up to 10 at a time. There is also supposed to be a bluffing option, which Darby also tries to do as well, but for the life of me, I can't figure out how to do it. I have my options to swap cards, my option to cheat, but I don't see a prompt for bluffing anywhere. Darby knows how to do it, so it can be done, but they don't tell you how. They expect you to figure it out for yourself. There's also the annoying feature that as you fill the mental gauge, Darby basically has a panic attack, which, while fun to see him suffer, means you have to sit there as he takes basically an entire minute to simply say the word call or panic and say he's about to bricks.
声が出ない。息が。勝負。
Guys, if you ever hear someone making those noises, it's probably a good idea to call them an ambulance. But eventually, you defeat the villains that come after you and gather all but one of the holy corpse parts, and finally come face to face with the noble one. And, of course, who else would it be but Dio? But not the Dio we know. No, an all-new, all-powerful Dio. Dio over heaven. What is that? He has his name written on his freaking face! And then he stomps the heroes, takes all but one corpse piece from the group, except for Jotaro's, because the series has to constantly make Jotaro seem unbeatable. Then they run away, and he gives the corpse pieces to the heroes who haven't been rescued yet, only for you to beat them and steal them back. Pretty stupid in all honesty. Something else that's stupid is you will occasionally encounter the villains of Part 4 and 5, who want revenge for being killed and might be working for Dio? I don't know. They have corpse pieces, but they never mention working for Dio, and then, after they're beaten, they're like, okay, fine, take this all-powerful artifact that was my only chance to beat you, but I'll be back. Even though it is now harder to beat you because you've taken this all-powerful artifact. And they never come back, so I don't get the point. But all in all, it's one of the very rare instances of time travel done successfully, and it is a unique and fun story to follow, and the ultimate dream of any hardcore JoJo fan to see all of the JoJo's together at once. It has a few goofy points, but what story doesn't? I give it a solid 8 out of 10. But this is a fighting game, so what is the game like when you actually fight? The gameplay is pretty standard. You have light and heavy attacks, as well as your special moves. Usually one of the character's moves pulled straight out of the show, which is fun. But what makes Eyes of Heaven unique is that it is an open map fighting game where you can run around freely, not necessarily just having to stand and face your opponents like you would in Tekken or something of the like. And once again, these environments are straight out of the show you can explore, even having certain level exclusive hazards, like the spikes in Air Saplana Island or Death 13 in the Dream World, with some even having special unique ways to finish off your opponent. And there are weapons around the arena you can throw at your opponent that are unblockable, but certain characters can interact with certain things differently. For example, super strong characters like Jotaro or the Pillar Man can pick up and throw much larger objects, like tables or statues, but weaker characters like Joseph or Jonathan can set traps that harm an enemy coming too close, so they can get a nasty shock that leaves them open to attack if they come too close to it, or if they come to use it themselves. Or you can just camp by it so they have to come and get shocked. Thankfully, you have 3 health gauges in this game. A healthy green gauge, an orange gauge to show you're a bit banged up, and a dark red gauge to show you're on your last legs. And something I find very interesting is the down system, where once one gauge is empty, your character collapses to the ground for a moment and can't be attacked until they're back on their feet, allowing you some sweet relief so you can't be endlessly comboed with no way to escape. Although there are 2 exceptions to the rule. But what makes this unique, or at least did at the time of the game's release, is that this is a 2v2 fighting game, where you and a partner fight 2 opponents. This can make it a fun co-op and let you include your friends for up to 4 people playing at a time, which is nice. And it also allows some unique character interactions by having certain characters partner together, as well as some combinations we never thought we'd see, like Jonathan fighting alongside Dio from Part 3, who is Dio's head on Jonathan's body, for those that don't know. This also allows for 2 unique kinds of attacks: dual combat finishers and dual heat attacks. Dual combo finishers are a bit misleading, as you fill up this gauge, which looks like a lazy streak of paint across the screen, to simply perform a powerful, flashy attack. The dual part comes from the fact that both characters can fill the gauge as they hit enemies. Also, it can only be activated by you and your partner activating it within like 5 seconds of each other, which could be a problem if you're both busy fighting someone. And don't think because you activated the dual combo finisher means you will use it when the gauge is full. No, whoever is the one to fill the gauge will be the one to execute it, which means you can almost have the gauge filled, but your partner lands the last hit and performs the attack anyways. This may not seem like a big deal until you realize this is a fighting game that gives you a rank at the end of the fight. And perfectionists will obviously want the maximum S rank, in which one of the methods of getting a higher score is to land 2 dual combo finishers and 2 dual heat attacks. And no, it does not count towards your score if your partner does the attack. Only if you do it. Which makes the game feel like less of a 2v2 fight and more like you're fighting 2 people while also racing to outdo your teammate. This might make you want to throw your teammate under the bus, but you also get a higher score the higher yours and your partner's health is at the end of the fight. There's also a bonus for whoever gets the first hit of the match, which once again you have to get, not your partner, turning it into a race between 4 people to get the hit in first. So you basically have to rush in without thinking. That didn't go well for Caesar. One more unique aspect of the game are JoJo'lities, which are special bonuses for doing a certain special action as certain characters. Each individual character having 5 JoJo'lities that are more or less unique to them. A few characters have similar ones, but they all have at least one unique one. And they can range from incredibly simple to complex, such as this one for Jonathan Joestar. Connect with a powerful attack on the 3rd interval in a mid-air combo finish.
Excuse me, what?
Now, admittedly, the wording is just confusing here. That means light, heavy attack in an aerial combo. Simple explanation, difficult to do, since your characters don't endlessly hang in the air like in Dissidia. It is a quick jump and they're back on the ground in 10 seconds at most, unless they're doing an aerial combo, which is difficult to do since your enemies aren't constantly jumping around. You're going to have to maneuver to a wall and deliver a combo that knocks them high into the air and far back enough so that they slam into the wall and stick there, but not too close or they'll be stuck maybe 2 feet in the air, which isn't long enough to do the combo. You need the right distance, at which point you can jump into the air and start hitting them with combos, while keep in mind they go into a down state if you do too much damage. It is a very fine line you have to delicately navigate. And this is where dual heat attacks come in. As you fight, you will eventually unlock a dual heat charge, allowing you to unleash a dual heat attack, where you charge directly into an opponent. If you successfully connect with the charge, everything immediately stops so you deliver a powerful ultimate cinematic attack in the veins of Street Fighter Ultras, doing a devastating attack for lots of damage. And if your ally is still alive, you two work together performing either the first or second half of your attack based on who activated the attack. After which, you wind up back in the center of the arena. And depending on the combination, certain pairs of characters have a wholly unique dual heat attack they do together, like Jotaro and Jolene. The only problem? Your ally can do this too. So let's say you've done all the complicated steps I just explained to do the move as Jonathan, only for your partner to hit the other opponent with a dual heat attack just before you land that heavy attack, at which point it goes into the dual heat attack, and all that hard work you put in now means nothing because you didn't land the last hit. Once again, it feels like you're fighting with your partner just as much as your opponent. Oh, and if you haven't figured it out yet, dual combo finishers and dual heat attacks are those two special examples I mentioned earlier that can damage you even after one of your health bars goes all the way down. And you can have up to 3 dual heat charges at a time, meaning you can do 3 ultimate attacks back to back if you so desire, which is absolutely broken. Speaking of broken, I mentioned earlier certain characters have special moves ripped straight from the show. However, some of these attacks, such as one of Joseph Joestar's, require outside items, such as a machine gun, tequila bottles, or grenades, which you will have to actively hunt down, otherwise you will have a special move you straight up cannot use. And some have abilities they straight up shouldn't use. One thing that greatly annoys me about the roster of this game is, while they have a great selection of characters, it could have been a greater selection, as some characters are used multiple times as different versions of the character. There are some cases where this makes sense, like Dio Brando and Dio. They're the same character, but one is vastly different from the other. The same with Dio under Heaven. Then there are characters that just randomly have 2 different versions of themselves, like Father Pucci and Pucci Waiting on the Moon. Yes, the character has a few upgrades now, but it's still basically the exact same character with a new ultimate move at best. There's even Part 4 Jotaro, who literally only has one move different from the normal Jotaro, and can't be chosen at the same time because even the game knows there's no difference. The same goes for Father Pucci and his counterpart, as well as Diego Brando and Alternate World Diego. All these spots could have been filled with people much more deserving. That does not feel like enough of a change to justify taking up a character slot that could have been used for someone better. They even made Mariah a character, and her stand is literally just an electrical outlet, and if someone touches it, they become magnetized, and magnetism becomes more powerful the closer they are to her, to the point where metal objects as big as cars can be latched onto someone to crush them. Cool as that sounds, it really is not that applicable to a fighting game. As you can see, the most she does is just toss around metal objects to allow the magnetism to do it. With that in mind, you see how they could have done so many more things with more active fighters from the series, if only they hadn't spent the place on repeat characters or different versions of the same character with little to no difference. And then there's new versions I simply can't stand, like Yoshikage Kira to Kosaku Kawajiri. Still the same character for all intents and purposes, but with a dual heat attack that can rewrite pretty much half of the fight. So you best not let that hit you. Also, he is one of the characters who gets a special item. Stray Cat, the bubble launching flower stand. if you are fighting him, do not let him pick that up, as besides upgrading his attacks, he cannot be hit during the animation of him picking it up and inserting it into his stand's stomach, which is insufferably long. It's 4 whole seconds, which doesn't sound like that much, but it is much longer when you have to sit there waiting for it as you or your partner are being assaulted by a second enemy. On the topic of characters having unique abilities, a small handful of characters even have a second chance ability, where after they are completely defeated, they come back with their last bar refilled for one more chance to defeat their opponent. But these vary greatly in effectiveness, with the most useless being Jonathan Joestar's. He gets back up with half of his last health bar filled and slowly draining, and only has enough time and energy for one last combo, at which point he falls back and dies. So unless you already had one opponent beaten and the other was one hit from death, this is basically useless. One last detail I feel I should mention is how free roaming is in story mode. It's very fun and gives you a more calm and peaceful time to explore the map, as I've said before. In some areas, you even get to ride on a little dirt bike, which is actually pretty fun. Around this time, you'll also encounter Shigechi from Part 4, whose stand, Harvest, is a little menace as a small army that will appear in every stage you can go to in clusters. You can pick up or attack to earn tickets. You can trade for helpful items to Rohan, who is in your party, so I don't know why he doesn't just give you these items he offers. But hunting Harvest can be fun, but it also feels like a distraction to artificially lengthen the game. Especially since most times, Harvest is in a place that can only be reached by Narancia's little bomber. And you have to do this 6 times, leaving the stage and coming back each time until you've done it 6 times, which can be a bit repetitive. Also, something I find hilarious is that there are additional side missions that have you taking on characters at level 45 and higher as certain characters. But even your characters that don't participate in these missions get some XP, so it's a great way to level up your characters before you even need them in the story mode. And heck, some missions even include characters that aren't unlocked until later in the story mode, but they still get the XP. So if you continuously do these missions, you can get a character to max level before they're even unlocked in story mode. Something I find strange, however, is the fact that the level cap in story mode is 50, but the highest level character you fight at the end of the story is only level 35. So you can be a full 15 levels higher than the final boss. That's just broken. Although I wouldn't recommend this for completionists, since being way higher level makes you way stronger, which makes it harder to do all the minor story things to get an S rank, which is one of the trophies, getting S ranks in every story mission. And one final thing in the story is the additions of buff and debuff cards. Before the fight, you can choose from a variety of cards you've either picked up along the way or bought in the shop to buff yourself and debuff your opponents, from making them move slower to starting the fight with decreased health, to even preventing them from using dual heat attack or combo finishers. Well, you can move faster, take less damage, deal more damage, or start off with at least 2 dual heat charges. Thank God this is only in a story, because if this could have been done online, this game would have started World War III. So ultimately, I think that it was a neat idea they had with the gameplay. The 2v2 is an interesting concept, and it's fun to see the characters interacting with each other, but it just feels too much like I'm working against my partner instead of with them, while also trying to defeat 2 different opponents. The roster could have included better characters instead of reusing the same characters multiple times, and some of the moves, abilities, and secret items certain characters can have just feels like they don't have a proper place in the game. So, with everything said that needed to be said, what do I think about JoJo's Bizarre Adventure Eyes of Heaven? Well, as I stated, the story was very unique and enjoyable, even with the few plot holes it had, and did a good job of explaining itself and how it works. But the interactions with Darby weighed it down a good bit, and essentially you do the story twice, getting the corpse parts, losing them, and getting them again, only for basically a rematch of the ending of Part 3. And the gameplay was unique and tried something that, at the time, wasn't done too often, but with the scoring system and how often your own partner can get in your way, I feel like the game ultimately would have benefited more from being a 1v1 game. And the reused characters with infuriating special attacks and items got on my nerves and took the enjoyment out of the game. But for a JoJo fan, it also hits a lot of sweet spots, bringing all the JoJo's and various versions of Dio together in an interesting and exciting way, offering interesting takes on the characters we hadn't seen before. Ultimately, I think JoJo's Bizarre Adventure Eyes of Heaven deserves a 6 out of 10 for a sharpened ranking. It gets the job done and it's worth your time, but it could still use some tempering to be truly great. The story is great, and there were definitely some ideas that kept it pretty sharp, but it was dulled down by a roster that wasn't as good as it could be, and a fighting system that can work against a player just as much, if not more, than it works for them. So there you go, guys. That is my take on JoJo's Bizarre Adventure Eyes of Heaven. What do you think? Would you still get the game? Are you interested in seeing if I overreacted, or do you think I was pretty spot on? Let me know down in the comments below. And for next time, I'll probably be reviewing Star Wars Jedi Knight Jedi Academy. So hopefully you guys will be looking forward to that. But for now, thank you all so much for watching. If you like this and want to see more, go ahead and slash that subscribe button. If you like this video, give a quick cut to the like button. Leave a comment down below. Share it around with all your friends. And be sure to follow me on Twitter and Facebook. Then I'll see you in the next video. But until then, my people, stay sharp.